The movie begins with a powerful mafia boss standing in an alley. He asks his men to beat up a culprit he has caught, and after he is done torturing the man, the mafia boss calls out his right-hand man named Frank. This mafia boss is Bumpy. Bumpy orders Frank to spray petrol on the culprit. He is given the order to burn the culprit alive with a cigar. Frank throws his cigar at him, and the man turns to ashes. The time then shifts to the daytime when Bumpy is distributing rations among the poor people. He throws bags of food towards the people, and from the look of the situation, the people love and respect Bumpy. Bumpy notices Frank standing amidst the crowd and glaring at him. He calls Frank over and takes a walk with him. Frank obeys his order, and they start walking around the streets. Bumpy talks about the situation of middle-class people becoming more and more oppressed by the rich people, and he wants to do something about this.
Corner's now a supermarket. Super fucking discount store. Where's the personal service?
They enter a shop, and while they are talking, Bumpy feels a strange pressure on his heart. He clutches his heart and lets out a painful sound. Frank quickly realizes watching is wrong and asks for the shop owner to call an ambulance, but the shop owner runs inside in fear. This causes Bumpy to fall on the group and die in the shop. Frank holds Bumpy's funeral at Bumpy's house, and dozens of gang leaders and political figures attend the funeral. Frank walks in and sees everyone is simply laughing or stuffing their mouths with food. He sees no sign of grief or remorse in the faces of these people and feels distaste for the situation. He pets Bumpy's pet dog and takes a look at all the new gang members. He realizes that after Bumpy's death, dozens of people want to take his place. The arrogant leaders chat with each other while the news channel broadcasts the news about Bumpy's death. They label him a hero to the poor and a threat for the police. Amidst the crowd, a gangster named Tango spots Frank and orders him to get a light for his cigarette. Frank avoids any sort of argument and simply walks away to get the light. Meanwhile, this man then talks to Frank and tells him how much Bumpy always adored Frank. Frank talks about him, and after this conversation, he decides to continue Bumpy's legacy and go after everyone who was indebted to Bumpy.
I know you're hurting, Frank. You're gonna be all right.
Yeah. You know, half the people in this room owe Bumpy money when he died. They think I'm gonna forget to collect, but I'm gonna get that money.
That's the spirit. Go get him.
At the same time, a police officer named Richie is investigating a drug case with his fellow police officer named Jay. Jay and Richie are partners in the mission. While their investigation is taking a serious turn, Richie finds $1 million inside an old car trunk. Jay gives him the idea to keep the money for themselves, but Richie, being the upright person, insists that they should turn in the money.
It's not just a couple of bucks, all right?
It's the same thing. Only if we don't, then you're right, we're fucked, but not if we keep it.
Without listening to Jay, Richie takes the money to the higher-ups and turns it in, which causes him to become disliked by his colleagues who wanted to split the money among themselves. Another officer from the higher-ups, Trupo, is a corrupt officer who has links with the drug lords' mafias. He notices Richie and realizes that Richie can become a huge problem for him in the future. Meanwhile, Frank meets up with Tango, who has started to cause rebellion against him since he believes that Bumpy is gone and he no longer needs to obey Frank's orders about drug dealing.
But you ain't see the job, Frank? The money job, Frank. What I gotta do, put a fucking sign on it?
Now, I'm the landlord, and the lease is 20%. This way, not even Bumpy took 20%.
Frank decides that he is going to start his own drug dealership now. He meets up with the Italian mafia, who are in charge of the drugs in the whole country. Frank decides that he is going to bypass this mafia and get in touch with the drug distributor himself so he can dominate the underworld himself. He makes his plans discreetly and doesn't let anyone find out about his plans. Following his mentor's steps, Frank devises his own plan. He goes to a phone booth and calls his cousin in Thailand. He devises a plan to get in touch with drug distributors in Thailand. After he talks to his cousin, he takes $400,000 with him and goes straight to Thailand. He meets up with his cousin, who introduces him to Nate, a former army member who has links with the drug makers. Frank tells Nate to introduce him to drug suppliers, which Nate does, but Frank makes his demand to get a supply of 100 kilograms of heroin. Nate advises Frank to adopt a strategy to have multiple suppliers to fulfill his demand, but Frank insists on getting it from a single source.
All right, you're gonna have to piece it together from several sources.
Go get it where they go get it from. I want to go to the source.
Fuck it, let's go.
Where you going?
Finally, Frank introduces him to a drug maker who gets impressed by Frank's determination and agrees on striking a deal with Frank. Frank gives the responsibility of transporting this drug to Nate and returns to the US. Richie, who is struggling in both his work life and family life, faces a new challenge from his wife, who demands a divorce from him as she feels Richie has no space for their family in his life. Richie wants to pursue her, but she leaves him and walks away.
Not moving to Las Vegas.
This weekend, last weekend. I'll see you in court. Come on, Michael.
Richie wants to become a lawyer, so he is studying very hard to pass his exams despite all the conditions in his life being against him. One day, however, Richie receives a call from his friend Jay, who informs him about a murder committed by him. He tells Richie to come over and get him. After Richie gets to the crime scene, he finds out that Jay was under the influence of drugs when he committed the murder. He tells Jay that he is not going to go against his morals and cover for Jay. Jay runs away to hide from the drug dealer's gang, but unfortunately, he is found dead after a few days. This sparks a new light in Richie, who now decides to investigate the drug suppliers by himself. The Bureau, after finding out that there are several corrupt officers in the police force, orders Richie to be assigned to the drug investigation case, as Richie is known for his honesty and morals. Frank's smuggled heroin gets to the airport without any problem, where Frank picks it up and starts distributing it among the gangs. Frank even tests the drug with a scientist who tells him that the drug is indeed pure and no additives are added in it. Word spread fast, and Frank's drug starts dominating the market. After earning his profit, Frank buys a huge property house for his mother and family to shift into, where he introduces his own brothers to the drug business. While Frank is making his success, other gangsters start envying him. Tango, who is burned by the fuel of jealousy, approaches Frank in public and tries to stop and threaten him, but Frank coldly shoots him in front of everyone.
Where's my money?
Get the fuck out of here, Frank. Oh, what you gonna do? You gonna shoot me in front of everybody?
There you go. 20%.
Frank displays his dominance and expresses that he no longer fears anyone, and if anyone else tries to stand up against him, they are going to meet their end like Tango. Richie forms an investigation team to investigate the drugs distributed by Frank, but with no new lead, he is stuck in the investigation. One day, Frank attends a party to expand his business when a beautiful girl named Eva catches his attention. He quickly becomes charmed by her and decides to rescue her. Before he can go after her, he sees his brother wearing expensive attire, which quickly enrages him. He takes his brother to the side and tells him to stop showing his wealth, or else the police are going to get suspicious of them. He quotes that the loudest person in a room is the weakest person in the room, which makes his brother understand the point, and he decides to stand down for the rest of the night.
Dad, what you got on? Big sign on it that says arrest me. The loudest one in the room is the weakest one in the room. I told you that.
Frank approaches Eva and starts to pursue her. She quickly becomes charmed by Frank's personality, and their relationship begins from then on. Richie also passes his exams while managing his team, but for months he has found no leads about the drug suppliers. Meanwhile, Frank expands his business to other states of the country. Now his business has bloomed to huge success, earning him millions and millions of dollars. Frank takes Eva to his house and introduces her to his family, with whom Eva becomes a part of Frank's family. Eva gifts Frank an expensive coat and tells him to attend a boxing match while wearing that attire. Frank doesn't have the heart to refuse Eva, so he agrees to her idea. They arrive at the venue and meet up with new businessmen and strong figures. Unluckily for him, Richie is also attending this party and notices Frank, who is wearing that expensive attire and getting all the attention. Richie quickly takes his picture and begins his further investigation of him. But after several attempts of finding any lead, Richie is left with no information, as Frank has always kept a low profile. Frank gets married to Eva, and his business starts facing some troubles. News spreads about him attending the boxing match in an expensive coat, and the corrupted officer Trupo approaches him and asks for money, or else he is going to expose Frank.
Walks around in $50,000 chinchilla coat and everything.
I don't know what you're talking
Do you pay your bills, I asked you?
If you...
10 grand. First of each month.
Frank gets enraged and goes straight home to burn the coat that has led the police to tail after him. Richie also finds new evidence by investigating and following Frank's brothers. Richie manages to capture the pictures of Frank's brothers distributing the drugs, which makes him get a lead on his case. One day, while escaping an assassination planned for him, Frank nearly dodges the bullets and escapes. Back at his home, Frank discusses how his location was revealed to the assassin, and the brothers start discussing the person. Frank, however, doesn't believe that it is a rival drug lord who is trying to kill him and suspects that there is someone on their tail. Frank decides to travel with his brother now, and Richie manages to get more information about them by following the brothers and Frank to various business transactions of the drugs. Frank, who is traveling with his brother to strike a business meeting again, gets stopped attacked by Trupo, who searches their car and finds the drugs inside it. This enrages Frank, who starts beating his own brother for making such a huge mistake. Richie witnesses this, and another lead is collected by him. Back at home, Frank watches the news and gets shocked when the news reporter states that the government is requesting their troops to come back from Thailand. Frank faces his worst fear and contacts Nate to order 2,000 keys of drugs, but Nate informs him that it is no longer possible as the military planes are returning back to the US. Frank decides to visit Thailand by himself and goes there. Unknown to him, Richie also follows Frank and finds out his links with Frank's cousin. Another opportunity strikes for Richie, who discovers Frank's cousin shooting a girl. Richie threatens to arrest him for murder, but Frank's cousin decides to save his life and snitch on Frank.
You got attempted murder. What do you think your cousin Frank is gonna think? But right now, Frank doesn't know. Trial, no jail, just walk out of here today.
He joins Richie's plans and plants a recording device on himself to collect evidence on Frank. Frank meets up with the drug dealer himself and tries to make his request to smuggle the drugs to the US. The drug dealer agrees, and they make a plan to smuggle the 2,000 kilograms of drugs to the US using the military planes. Frank calls his brother in the US to inform him about the delivery of the drugs. Unknowingly, this conversation is overheard by the investigation team, who are secretly listening to Frank's call. They start preparing for a raid on the military plane. At the same time, Trupo uses this opportunity to raid Frank's house illegally. He uses force to enter Frank's house and starts to abuse Frank's mother and wife to find the money. He thrashes around the house and searches every nook and corner to find money that Frank is hiding, but after several attempts, he doesn't find anything. He then spots the doghouse being abnormally big and searches there, resulting in him finding bags full of cash. He happily takes the money with him in triumph, but doesn't realize the gravity of the situation that he has put himself in. The military plane carrying Frank's drugs flies in the US, and Richie arrives at the airport with a search warrant. He shows it to a military officer and smiles. After showing the warrant, he and his team enter the plane to look for drugs. After thoroughly searching for drugs, Richie's team is not able to find a single bag of the drugs, which makes Richie confused, as he had deciphered the message sent by Frank perfectly. Richie suspects that the drugs are hidden inside the coffins and starts searching the coffins, but upon opening the coffins, he only finds the dead bodies. A higher-up officer then scolds Richie for being so reckless and searching up military coffins. He lectures Richie about dishonoring the dead soldiers and blames him for suspecting the military without solid proof.
The United States Army is in the drug trafficking business of young men who have given their lives in the defense. Shut the fuck up!
Richie was unable to prove his point and left with a dead end again. An opportunity strikes for him when he notices that the coffins are being transported to a warehouse. He quickly follows the coffin's truck and finds out that the drugs were indeed inside the coffins, but hidden inside a secret compartment. He prepares his investigation team for backup and starts following the drugs being transported. He finds the warehouse of the drugs and quickly raids it inside with the police officers. A battle erupts with the police officers shooting down Frank's men. Richie manages to catch Frank's brother and makes him a key piece of evidence in his case. Back at Frank's house, Frank returns from Thailand and finds his mother and wife in a distressed state. He inquires about the situation, and his mother tells him about Trupo finding his money from the doghouse. This becomes the last straw for Frank to tolerate Trupo. Before Frank can strike back, the police officers team, led by Richie, catches Frank after a church duty and arrests him on the spot for drug dealing. The court hearing is fixed, where Frank is presented as the criminal while Richie presents his case. Richie claims that Frank is the most dangerous man around their country, with a huge chain of drug suppliers in different states. The case then proceeds, and Frank is found guilty with all the charges going against his favor. The first proceeding is done, and Frank is taken in by the police. Frank asks the police department to arrange a meeting between him and Richie since he wants to negotiate with Richie. Frank meets up with Richie and tries to persuade him into dropping the case against him, but Richie, who is already adamant on ending this drug chain, refuses to take the case back. Frank tries to convince him in every possible way, but Richie remains firm on punishing Frank. Frank then comes up with an idea to punish Trupo and tells Richie that he is going to help Richie catch all the corrupt officers in the police department if Richie decides to drop a few charges against him. Richie agrees since it is his prior motive to catch every corrupt person in the bureau.
What you want to do? You talking about police? You want police? Your own kind.
Not my kind.
Arrested today on charges of taking bribes from the city's largest police corruption scandal.
Frank starts giving Richie the list of all the corrupt officers and begins to work on the case alongside Richie. Frank also reveals Trupo's name to punish him inside the jail himself. But Trupo, after finding out he is listed in the corrupt list, commits suicide to avoid getting tortured by Frank. Finally, with the help of Frank, 3/4 of the Bureau's police officers are arrested for corruption and their links with narcotics distributors. The court then punishes Frank with a sentence of 70 years for the chain of drug supplies. The other officers who are arrested are also given tough punishments. Richie also quits his life as a crime investigator and becomes a full-time attorney for Frank. He appeals to the judge to reduce Frank's life sentence, and due to his help in catching the corrupt leaders, Frank's life sentence reduces to 15 years of imprisonment. Frank's other family members who are also involved in the drug business are also arrested and imprisoned by the police. Frank's assets, which were estimated to be $250 million at the case proceeding, were also taken in by the government. Frank is then taken to jail to serve his sentence while an investigation around the state continues to find out all the resources of the drugs. After 15 years pass, Frank is released from prison. He walks out of the police station with a huge smile on his face. A familiar face awaits Frank's arrival, and Frank smiles after seeing him. Richie stands in front of Frank to welcome him outside the prison. Frank walks around the city with Richie, and they talk about all the things that have changed since the last 15 years. Frank thanks Richie for being on his side, and they continue walking together in the streets just like Bumpy once walked with Frank.